into all of this like super wide-eyed and just like I love monkeys and I'm so excited to care for them, and it like quickly just sort of was like, oh God, like this is like this image, this is their lives, you know? I'm not showing you anything egregious here, but like at the same time, when you start to think about the fact that like this is the entirety of their lives sitting in these barren cages. If they're lucky, they're with another individual. Oftentimes they're being, you know, used to have babies, and their babies are forcibly taken from them. So it's like it's just such a upsetting cycle, and that in and of itself started to get to me. It's it's very like hopeless feeling, or you know. So one of the weekends there was one room in this lab where there would be kind of like a group. It was like a group setting, and this was very unusual. I think in general for labs with primates, but especially at our lab, like there was only one room where it was sort of like a group family dynamic. So there'd be like a bigger male who was like the breeder male, and then there were like maybe 4 or 5 other like females or sort of like lesser males in the group. And they basically lived in a giant form of what you're seeing here, like a giant cage. So it was still very barren, very little like going on in there. Oftentimes, like the drains were like filling up because they weren't draining like properly. So you'd have like feces around that wouldn't go down. It was really dark. Lots of poor lighting issues. So, you know, they were in a more normalized social setting, all things considered. But what happened in this case was that that Saturday I was going through doing health checks, or, you know, getting an eye on everybody, and I saw a female who was carrying around her baby, but I realized that the baby was limp. So the baby was dead. So this was a brand new infant. And she was carrying them around. And you know, I could go on multiple tangents about how mothers feel about their infants and what we've seen, not just in labs, but in the outside world, about the grief that animals experience when they lose their babies. I'm sure that many of you are aware of the orca whale who has now unfortunately had a second baby that she is carrying who is deceased, and that this is like out of mourning and true grief. And so in this case, you know, she's carrying this baby around. She doesn't want to let them go. I had informed my supervisor, who said give her another day. If she's still carrying the baby around tomorrow, Sunday, we'll need to have her removed. And so Sunday came along, and she was still carrying her baby around. And so what ended up happening is me and my coworker, we had to figure out how to get her out of this enclosure. And because it was a group enclosure, it's a lot harder to get these monkeys to come out. A lot of times they're not keen on leaving. This is their home. This is their safe place. So even though it looks barren and, you know, super depressing, that's still where they feel safe. So we were having a tough time trying actually to be the one to come forward into like a carrying cage. And so what ended up happening is that I went into the enclosure with all of the monkeys to try to sort of help get her uncomfortable enough to go to the other area to get into this carrying cage. And it worked. And at the time, like it was like, oh, this is what I need to do for my job. And in hindsight, I'm like, wow, you really risked your entire life. Like if they had been less afraid of you and like, especially this male who, you know, has teeth that are this big, I could have been seriously hurt. But this just like, they were like, yeah, you got to get him out. So we were like, okay, I guess this is the job. So we ended up getting her out, and we took her in this carrying cage, is what we call it, transport, to something called a tabletop transport. This is what it looks like. This is not the monkey, but it's hard to find imagery of this online. So this is what I was able to find. And usually what this restraint, well, we call it a squeeze, because you can kind of tighten it like this with, and it'll basically secure them so that then you can do what you're seeing here, like give a shot, for example, and hopefully not get grabbed or bitten. Now, in the case of this individual, we weren't trying to squeeze her. We were just like, we put the carrying cage to the entrance, which you can't really see in this picture, but would be where her face was. And so what I did was I was taking marshmallows, which were like a high value treat, and putting them there for the monkey to come out and take. And then like trying to sort of, yeah, entice her to come out and, I don't know, give the baby, I guess. And me and my coworker are standing there doing this, and I put the marshmallow down, and she comes out, she's still holding her baby, and she takes the marshmallow and she goes back in the carrying cage. And this happened a few times. And I think it was like the third time or so that I put a marshmallow piece down, and she came out, and this time she set her baby down, and she bent over and put her lips on the baby's forehead and went back into the carrying cage without her baby and without the marshmallow. And, you know, people can say all sorts of things, but I have no doubt in my mind that she knew what we were doing. She knew what we were there for. And I think she knew on some level that it was hopeless and that she needed to say goodbye to the baby. So my coworker ended up taking her back to, her group, and I had to put her baby in a biohazard bag and into the freezer. Something I did with too many infants, honestly. So I kind of alluded to this, but I think it's a really important point to make. And I'm going to be kind of talking as we go through about practices of the industry as well as practices of activists, because I think that it's important for us to look at what we're doing and what our goals are in terms of like basically trying to make the world a more just place for humans and animals. And so a colleague of mine, a good friend, Dr. Crystal Heath, who's the executive director of our honor, she said this the other day in one of our conversations, which, we have lots of conversations about things like this. She said all animal industries benefit from activist depictions of the worst industry practices. Those in the industry, interns and students just starting in the industry, can look around and believe that they're working for a good company and that their colleagues display compassion for the animals that is above and beyond industry standards simply because they're not seeing the most egregious industry practices taking place. And the reason that I bring this up, especially here, is what I told you, there's not, this monkey was not being outright tortured. There's not this horrible image. And I'm not at all saying that we shouldn't use those to show people what happens. But I think if we rely on the worst case scenario all the time, it becomes a lot easier for the industry to say that well, we're not like that. Things aren't like that. And what I want individuals to understand is the monotony of this life for these animals, just what they're actually going through day to day, should be of concern. You're seeing a lot of photos of primates too. Obviously my background is with primates, but this goes for all of these animals that are used in research. We need to, on some level, think about their daily lives and what that's like, outside of something absolutely horrible taking place. Many workers that I've spoken to have, admitted that they're being psychologically impacted by what is going on. And this shouldn't really come as a surprise, and yet it's not, we don't treat working in research as something that is inherently traumatic. And I definitely argue that it should be. Recently, I was talking with a psychologist who brought up the term moral injury, and I had never heard it before, actually. And, you know, when she explained it, like that, this ethical conflict where your personal beliefs, like, you know, wanting to care about these animals clash with what your professional duties are. For example, trying to like frighten this monkey into a carrying cage. This starts to really mess with people, and moral injury is definitely something that is being seen for people who are working in labs.